The room was quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, the heavy kind, the kind that sits on your chest and makes even success feel empty. Alex Hormozi sat in the chair staring at the floor. Millions in the bank, businesses growing, respect from entrepreneurs around the world. But inside, nothing. No excitement, no fire, no hunger, just numb. He rubbed his hands together slowly. Do you ever feel like you've built everything you wanted, but somehow you can't feel it anymore? Across from him sat Tony Robbins. Tony leaned forward slightly, studying him the way a coach studies an athlete who has suddenly stopped running. Alex, Tony said calmly, that feeling you're describing happens to some of the most driven people on earth. Alex shook his head. But I should feel grateful. I should feel excited. Instead, it's like my emotions just switched off. Tony smiled slightly. Good. Alex looked up, confused. Good. Tony nodded. Yes, because numbness isn't the absence of emotion. He paused. It's your mind protecting you. Tony stood up and began walking slowly across the room. Let me ask you something, Alex. When was the last time you actually stopped? Alex laughed quietly. Stopped what? Tony raised his eyebrow. Exactly. Tony continued. You built your life like a machine. Goals, growth, optimization, discipline, scale. And it worked. But here's what happens to high performers. He tapped the table. When your brain is constantly chasing the next mountain, stop celebrating the ones you've already climbed. Alex leaned back. Tony continued. Most people think burnout means being tired. Tony shook his head. Burnout isn't exhaustion. It's emotional shutdown. Alex looked thoughtful now. Tony pointed toward him. You trained your brain to ignore feelings that slow you down. Fear, ignore it. Doubt, push through it. Stress, work harder. And eventually, Tony said softly, your brain gets so good at blocking pain. He paused, that it blocks joy too. The room went silent again. But this time, Alex was listening differently. Tony leaned forward. Let me tell you something most successful people never talk about. The traits that make you successful? He raised one finger. Relentless focus. Second finger. Emotional control. Third finger. Obsessive discipline. Tony looked Alex straight in the eyes. Those same traits can slowly disconnect you from life. Alex sighed. That sounds accurate. Tony smiled. You didn't lose your emotions, Alex. You just trained yourself not to need them. He continued. When you were broke, emotions fueled you. Frustration made you work harder. Fear made you move faster. Hope made you dream bigger. But once you win, Tony spread his hands. The brain asks a dangerous question. What now? And when that question doesn't have a meaningful answer, the mind goes quiet. Not peaceful quiet, numb quiet. Tony leaned closer. But here's the truth most people miss. Numbness isn't a sign that something is broken. It's a signal. Alex raised an eyebrow. A signal of what? Tony smiled. That your life has outgrown your current mission. Tony Robbins looked at Alex Hormozi and asked a simple question. Alex, when was the last time you did something for the first time? Alex paused. His mind started searching. Launching businesses? Done many times. Scaling companies? Routine now. Speaking on stage? Normal. He slowly shook his head. I don't remember. Tony nodded. That's the problem. Tony continued walking across the room like a coach thinking out loud. The human brain needs novelty. It needs challenge. It needs growth. But when you become extremely good at what you do, he smiled slightly. Life becomes predictable. Alex leaned forward. So you're saying success made life boring? Tony laughed. Not boring. Comfortable. And comfort, Tony said firmly, is the fastest way to emotional numbness. Tony grabbed a marker and wrote 2 words on a board. Survival mode. He turned toward Alex. For years, your brain lived here. When money was tight, when businesses could fail, when every decision mattered, your brain was on high alert. Adrenaline. Stress. Excitement. Every win felt huge. Tony then wrote another phrase. Autopilot mode. This is where you live now. Alex watched silently. Tony explained. When life becomes predictable, the brain saves energy. It stops producing the same emotional intensity. Alex nodded slowly. So my brain thinks everything is Normal now? Tony snapped his fingers. Exactly. What once felt extraordinary. Tony paused. Now feels ordinary. Tony leaned against the table. Let me ask you another question. What actually excites you right now? Alex thought for a long moment. Finally, he answered honestly, I don't know. Tony smiled. That honesty right there. That's the beginning of the breakthrough. Tony continued. Most people try to fix numbness by chasing more success. More money, more business, more achievements. Tony shook his head, but numbness isn't solved by doing more of the same thing. It's solved by expanding who you are. Alex looked curious now. Tony continued. You built businesses, but have you built experiences? You built wealth, but have you built adventure? You built discipline, but have you built joy? The question hung in the air. Alex crossed his arms. But if I slow down, I'm scared I'll lose my edge. Tony nodded immediately. That fear is extremely common among high performers. He continued. Your identity is built around being productive, winning, growing, achieving. So when life slows down, Tony tapped the table. You feel like you're losing. Alex laughed quietly. That's exactly how it feels. Tony smiled. But here's the truth most people discover too late. Your edge doesn't disappear when you slow down. It disappears when you lose meaning. Alex looked up. Tony continued softly. And meaning comes from growth, not just achievement. Part 8. Rewiring the brain. Tony stood up again with renewed energy. Let's talk solutions. Alex leaned forward. Tony raised 3 fingers. 3 things wake the human brain up. Do uncertainty. Doing something you're not good at. Do contribution. Helping people in a way that deeply matters. 3. Challenge. Not the kind you've already mastered. The kind that scares you. Tony smiled. Your brain needs new mountains. Alex nodded slowly. So I need a bigger goal? Tony shook his head. Not bigger. Different. Tony looked directly at Alex. Alex, you're not numb because life is empty. You're numb because your nervous system adapted to winning. Alex let out a deep breath. Tony continued. You solved the problems that once gave your life urgency. Money problems, business survival, security. And now your brain is waiting for the next mission. Tony leaned closer. The question isn't, why do I feel numb? The question is, what challenge is big enough to wake you up again? Alex sat quietly, but something had shifted. For the first time in the conversation, his eyes had energy again. Tony smiled as he saw the change. Here's what most people misunderstand about happiness. Happiness isn't comfort. Happiness is progress. When you're growing, learning, building something meaningful, the brain lights up again. Tony placed a hand on Alex's shoulder. You're not broken. You're evolving. Alex nodded slowly. Tony continued. The moment you stop asking, what do I need? And start asking, what am I capable of becoming? Everything changes. Alex stood up. For the first time that day, he felt something. Not numbness, not pressure, but possibility. Tony smiled. Good. Now go build the next version of your life.